The night my parents threw me out into a blinding snowstorm, they looked me straight in the eyes and said I wasn't their responsibility anymore. The freezing wind hit my face the second the front door slammed behind me. I stood there holding one old backpack, trying to understand how the people who raised me could leave me outside on the coldest night of the year. I truly believed I would never see another sunrise. Years later, those same people stood at my front door asking me for the help they once refused to give me. Before I tell you how everything came full circle, stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Brenna Whitlock. I was 24 years old, and I lived with my parents on the edge of a small town in rural Minnesota. Life was never easy in our house. I worked hard, paid my own bills whenever I could, cleaned the house, cooked meals, and tried my best to keep peace in the family. No matter how much I did, it was never enough for my parents. My mother, Marlo, always found something to criticize. My father, Gideon, rarely defended me. Instead, he stayed quiet and let everything happen. The biggest problem in our family was my younger brother, Dax. He could make mistake after mistake, and somehow my parents always found a way to excuse him. If he wasted money, someone else was blamed. If he broke something, it became someone else's fault. If he lied, they believed him anyway. I learned a long time ago that I would never come first in their eyes. One evening, everything finally exploded. Money had become a serious problem in our home, and another argument started because of Dax's reckless choices. Instead of asking him to take responsibility, my parents turned all their anger toward me. I tried to explain that I wasn't the reason our family was struggling, but they refused to listen. Every word I spoke only made them angrier. Then my father pointed toward the front door and told me to leave. My mother grabbed my backpack, threw it outside, and said if I thought life was so unfair, I could figure it out on my own. Before I could say another word, the door slammed shut behind me while snow covered the ground around my feet. I pulled my jacket tighter around my body and started walking without knowing where I was going. The snow kept falling harder, and the road was almost impossible to see. My hands felt numb, and my boots were soaked with icy water. Every step became slower than the last. I looked around, hoping to see a passing car or a house with lights on, but the road was empty. The cold reached deep into my bones, and I began losing all feeling in my fingers. I kept telling myself to stay awake and keep moving, but my body was giving up. My legs became weak, and my breathing felt heavy. After what felt like hours, I stumbled toward the side of the road and collapsed near a mailbox. I closed my eyes for just a moment, thinking maybe I would never open them again. A voice suddenly called out to me. I felt someone gently shaking my shoulder and wrapping a thick blanket around me. When I opened my eyes, I saw an older woman with kind eyes looking down at me. Her name was Laureen Ashcroft, a retired schoolteacher who lived alone in a nearby farmhouse. She had seen me lying in the snow while checking her mailbox. Without asking questions, she helped me into her truck and drove me to her home. Inside, the warm air made my frozen skin sting, but I was thankful to be alive. Laureen helped me out of my wet clothes, gave me clean blankets, and placed a cup of hot soup in my hands. She didn't pressure me to explain anything. She simply told me I was safe and could rest as long as I needed. That kindness broke something inside me. I had spent so long trying to earn love from people who never wanted to give it, and here was a complete stranger treating me with more care than my own family ever had. I stayed in bed for 2 days while my strength slowly returned. Laureen checked on me often, made warm meals, and spoke to me with patience and respect. As my body healed, my heart faced a painful truth. I finally accepted that there was no home waiting for me anymore. The people I had called my family had made their choice, and I could not keep hoping they would suddenly change. That realization hurt more than the cold ever could. On the third morning, I looked out the window at the snow-covered fields and made a quiet promise to myself. I would never go back and beg for their love. If I was going to survive, I would build a new life with my own hands, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. After I regained my strength, I knew I could not stay without helping. I asked Laureen if I could pay her back somehow, but she smiled and told me the best way to thank her was to build a better future for myself. I took those words seriously. Within a week, I started looking for work. It wasn't easy because I had very little money and no one to rely on except myself. I accepted the first job I could find, cleaning office buildings after business hours. Every evening I carried cleaning supplies from room to room, wiping desks, emptying trash cans, and mopping floors until late at night. When that shift ended, I went straight to a grocery store where I stocked shelves until early morning. The work was exhausting, but every paycheck reminded me that I was moving forward. I refused to let my past decide my future. Even with 2 jobs, I wanted an education. I enrolled in a nearby community college because I believed learning new skills could change my life. My days became a nonstop routine. I attended classes, studied whenever I found a free moment, worked through the night, and slept only a few hours before starting again. Some mornings I felt so tired that I could barely keep my eyes open, but quitting was never an option. Lorene encouraged me every step of the way. She always asked about my classes, celebrated every good grade, and reminded me that I was capable of more than I believed. She listened when I doubted myself and gave advice without judging me. Little by little, she became the caring parent I had always wished for. During one semester, I took an introductory bookkeeping class. Numbers came naturally to me. I enjoyed organizing records, balancing accounts, and solving financial problems. My instructor noticed how quickly I understood the work and encouraged me to take more business courses. I followed that advice and discovered I also enjoyed budgeting, planning, and finding ways to improve how businesses operated. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had found something I was truly good at. My confidence slowly returned with every class I completed and every paycheck I earned. I no longer saw myself as the scared young woman who had lost everything. I started believing that I could stand on my own without depending on anyone else. The road was still difficult, but each small success gave me more strength. I realized that independence was not built in one day. It was built through thousands of small choices to keep going, even when life was hard. Those choices were slowly creating a future that belonged to me alone. After finishing my business courses, I started applying for better jobs. Most companies wanted people with years of experience, so I received many rejection letters. I refused to give up. One afternoon, I was invited to interview at a small manufacturing company that made metal parts for farm equipment. The business had been losing money for several years, and many employees believed it would soon close. The owner, Ellis Norwood, was honest during the interview. He told me they could only offer a modest salary because the company was struggling. I accepted the position without hesitation because I saw it as an opportunity to prove myself. During my first few weeks, I carefully studied the company's financial records. I noticed unnecessary spending, unpaid invoices, and poor budgeting. Instead of complaining, I made detailed reports and suggested practical ways to reduce costs and improve cash flow. Ellis listened to every idea with an open mind. Together we created a plan to organize expenses, negotiate with suppliers, and collect overdue payments. The changes did not bring success overnight, but month after month the company slowly became stronger. Employees who once feared losing their jobs began smiling again as new orders arrived. Ellis often thanked me for my hard work, but I always reminded him that saving the company was a team effort. Even so, he believed I had played an important role in turning things around. As time passed, Ellis became more than my employer. He became my mentor. He taught me how to make difficult business decisions, how to earn people's trust, and how to stay calm during challenging times. He treated me with respect and encouraged me to keep learning. One day he called me into his office and surprised me with an offer. He wanted me to become his business partner. I was speechless because no one had ever believed in me that much before. After thinking carefully, I accepted. The following years were filled with steady growth. The company expanded, hired more workers, and earned a strong reputation throughout the region. My income increased, but I never forgot the days when every dollar mattered. I continued saving carefully instead of spending carelessly. Eventually, I had enough money to buy a beautiful house with a large front porch and tall trees surrounding the property. The day I received the keys, I walked through every room in silence, grateful for everything I had achieved. It was the first home that truly felt like mine. I never called my parents to tell them where I lived or what I had accomplished. They had chosen to remove me from their lives years ago, and I chose to leave the past where it belonged while focusing on the peaceful future I had worked so hard to build. Several years passed, and I rarely thought about the people I had left behind. My days were filled with work, new goals, and the quiet life I had built for myself. Then, once in a while, I would run into someone from my hometown during a business trip or at a local event. They recognized my name and asked if I had heard what was happening with my family. I never asked for details, but people talked anyway. Piece by piece, I learned what had happened after I left. Dax had never changed. Instead of becoming more responsible, his decisions became even worse. He jumped from one idea to another, hoping to make easy money, but every plan failed. He borrowed money from banks, friends, and anyone willing to trust him. When he couldn't repay what he owed, he went back to my parents asking them to save him. Just as they always had, they rushed to fix his problems. They paid his debts again and again, believing the next time would finally be different. It never was. Every rescue only encouraged him to make another careless choice. As the years went by, the financial pressure became too much. My parents refinanced their house to get more money. When that wasn't enough, they emptied the retirement savings they had spent decades building. Even after giving up so much, the bills kept growing. Interest piled up, loans became larger, and the debt became impossible to control. Friends who once tried to warn them slowly stepped away because they refused to listen. They continued protecting the one child they believed could do no wrong, even as everything around them fell apart. Eventually, they lost almost everything they had worked for. Their financial security disappeared, and the life they had built over many years was gone. Hearing those stories brought mixed emotions. Part of me felt sad because no one dreams of seeing their family suffer. Another part of me remembered all the choices that had led them there. They had ignored every warning and continued making the same decisions. None of it had happened overnight. It was the result of years of refusing to face the truth. I never celebrated their problems, and I never wished them harm. At the same time, I knew their situation was no longer my responsibility. I had spent enough of my life carrying burdens that did not belong to me. I quietly listened, thanked people for sharing the news, and continued with my own life. After each conversation, I returned home, focused on my work, and appreciated the peaceful future I had created. I had learned that looking back would never help me move forward, so I chose to keep my attention on the life I had earned instead of the one I had left behind. One winter evening, snow covered the streets outside my house. I had just finished making dinner and was reading a book near the fireplace when I heard a slow knock at my front door. It was already dark, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the front window, but could only see two figures standing on the porch. They looked tired and cold. I walked to the door and opened it. The moment I saw their faces, I froze. Standing in front of me were Marlowe and Gideon. Time had changed them. Their hair had turned gray, their faces looked older, and their expensive clothes had been replaced by worn winter coats that looked too thin for the weather. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. They stared at me as if they weren't sure they had found the right house. I could see the surprise in their eyes. They were looking at someone they no longer recognized. I was no longer the frightened young woman they had pushed out of their home. I stood confidently in the doorway of a house I had earned through years of hard work. My father finally broke the silence. In a quiet voice, he asked if they could come inside because they had nowhere else to go. My mother lowered her head and avoided looking directly at me. The words hung in the cold air while snow continued falling around us. My hand remained on the doorknob as I looked at both of them. Suddenly, memories rushed back into my mind with painful clarity. I remembered another winter night when I had stood outside a different front door. I remembered pleading with my parents to let me stay inside where it was warm. I remembered the freezing wind, the heavy snow, and the feeling of being completely alone. I could almost hear the sound of that door closing again. For a moment, it felt as though the past and the present had come together on my front porch. My heart raced as I tried to control my emotions. Part of me wanted to close the door and walk away without saying a word. Another part of me refused to become the kind of person they had been. I took a deep breath and stepped aside. Without saying much, I allowed them to enter. They quietly removed their wet boots and stood in the entryway, looking around the house with expressions of disbelief. Neither of them spoke about why they had come or how they had found me. The silence inside the house felt heavier than the snow outside. I knew this visit was not an accident. After all these years, the past had finally arrived at my front door, and I had a feeling that everything I had tried to leave behind was about to be brought back into my life. I served a simple dinner, and we sat around the table in complete silence for several minutes. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. My parents looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other as if they were waiting for someone else to speak first. Finally, my father cleared his throat. He admitted that they had lost almost everything. The house was gone, their savings had disappeared, and they had nowhere left to turn. He said they needed financial help to get back on their feet. My mother quickly added that I was doing well now and could easily help them. She spoke as if the answer was obvious. Then she said something that stopped me cold. She reminded me that they had raised me and said children should take care of their parents when times became difficult. I looked at both of them for a long moment before saying a single word. My voice stayed calm, but every sentence carried years of pain. I asked them if they truly believed I owed them simply because they had given me a place to live when I was a child. I reminded them that being a parent meant more than providing food and a roof. It meant protecting your child when they needed you the most. I slowly began talking about the years they seemed to have forgotten. I reminded them how every mistake Dax made somehow became my fault. I reminded them how they defended him no matter what he did while expecting me to carry every burden without complaint. Then I spoke about the night that changed my life forever. I described standing outside in the freezing weather with only one backpack. I reminded them how I begged for another chance to come inside before the cold became too dangerous. I told them I could still remember looking at the front door, hoping it would open again. Instead, it stayed closed while I faced the worst night of my life alone. My father lowered his eyes to the table. My mother tried to interrupt, but I gently asked her to let me finish because I had listened to them for years without anyone listening to me. I explained that a stranger had shown me kindness when my own family refused. I told them that every success I had achieved came after they decided I no longer mattered. The room became completely silent again. This time neither of them argued. They did not blame Dax. They did not make excuses. They did not claim I was remembering things incorrectly. They simply sat there with regret written across their faces. For the first time since I was a little girl, they had nothing left to deny because they both knew every word I had spoken was the truth. My parents waited for my answer. I could see hope in their faces, but I also knew they expected me to forget everything because they needed something from me. I stayed calm. I did not raise my voice, and I did not insult them. There was no anger left inside me that needed to come out. I had carried that pain for too many years, and I had already learned how to let it go. I looked at them and quietly said that I would not give them money simply because we shared the same last name. Family was not just about blood. Family was about standing beside each other during the hardest moments in life. I told them that real parents do not leave their child alone on a freezing winter night. Real parents do not turn their backs when their child has nowhere to go. Those actions had consequences, and no amount of time could erase them. My mother started crying softly. My father tried to speak, but no words came out. I walked into my home office and opened a drawer where I kept important papers and community information. When I returned, I placed several printed pages on the table. They looked at me with confusion. I explained that these papers contained the addresses of emergency shelters, food assistance programs, job placement offices, and organizations that help people rebuild their lives after financial hardship. I had learned about many of these places years earlier because kind strangers had pointed me in the right direction when I had nothing. Those resources had helped me take my first steps toward a better future. I slid the papers closer to them and said that these organizations were filled with people who truly wanted to help. If they were willing to work hard and accept support, they could begin again just as I once had. My mother quietly asked if that was all I was willing to do. I nodded and answered honestly. I said this was the same kind of help I had received when I had been left with nothing. Nobody handed me a large amount of money. Nobody solved my problems for me. They gave me kindness, guidance, and a chance to stand on my own feet. That chance had changed my life. As they looked down at the papers, I saw understanding slowly appear on their faces. They realized I was not treating them with cruelty. I was treating them with the same level of compassion that strangers had once shown me. The difference was painful. Complete strangers had offered hope without expecting anything in return, while my own parents had once refused me even the safety of a warm home. That truth filled the room with a silence that no one could escape. For a long time, nobody spoke. My father finally looked up at me with tears in his eyes. His shoulders seemed lower than I had ever seen them. In a quiet voice, he admitted that he had failed me as a father. He said there had been many moments when he knew something was wrong, but he stayed silent because he wanted to avoid arguments at home. He confessed that every time he chose to remain quiet, he was choosing the wrong side. He said he should have protected me instead of allowing me to face everything alone. Hearing those words meant more than I expected, but they could not change the past. My mother wiped away her tears and tried to explain herself. She said life had been stressful and that she had only wanted to keep the family together. She insisted she believed helping Dax was the right thing to do because she thought he would eventually change. She admitted she had made mistakes, but she also kept searching for reasons to defend her decisions. Even now, she struggled to fully accept the damage those choices had caused. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I calmly told both of them that understanding their reasons did not erase the pain their actions had created. Some wounds heal, but they still leave scars. I took a slow breath before saying something I had never imagined I would say. I told them I forgave them. They both looked surprised. I explained that I was not forgiving them because they deserved it. I was forgiving them because I no longer wanted to carry the weight of anger in my own heart. Holding on to bitterness would only continue hurting me. Forgiveness gave me peace, but it did not mean everything could return to the way it once was. I also told them that I could not rebuild our relationship. Too much trust had been broken, and some things could never be repaired. I wished them well and hoped they would find a way to move forward, but my life would continue on a different path. My father slowly nodded as though he had expected that answer all along. My mother cried quietly, finally realizing there was nothing left to argue about. They stood up, thanked me for allowing them into my home, and gathered their coats. I walked them to the front door. Before leaving, my father looked back one last time and softly said he was sorry. Then they stepped outside into the cold evening and walked away together. I watched until they disappeared from sight. After closing the door, I stood in the quiet house for several moments. Instead of sadness, I felt something I had not felt in many years. The heavy burden I had carried for so long was finally gone, and my heart felt lighter than ever before. A few days later, I drove to visit Lorene. She was sitting on her front porch with a warm cup of tea, smiling the moment she saw my car pull into the driveway. She welcomed me with the same kindness she had shown me from the very beginning. We spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and remembering how much life had changed over the years. I thanked her once again for opening her door to a young woman who had nowhere else to go. She smiled and told me she had only done what any caring person should do. I gently shook my head because I knew that was not true. Many people had the chance to help me, but she was the one who actually did. Without her, my story might have ended very differently. As I drove home that evening, I kept thinking about the people who had helped me along the way. None of them shared my last name, yet they had given me hope when I needed it most. They believed in me before I believed in myself. Their kindness had changed the direction of my life forever. That thought inspired me to do something meaningful. I met with my lawyer and financial advisor to create a scholarship for young adults who wanted to continue their education after being abandoned by their families. I also started an emergency housing fund that would provide safe temporary shelter during the winter for anyone facing the same kind of situation I once faced. I wanted others to receive the chance that had been given to me. Every year, I met some of the students and young people who benefited from those programs. Their determination reminded me of the person I had once been. Watching them build better futures became one of the greatest joys of my life. Looking back, I finally understood something important. My greatest revenge had never been making my parents suffer or watching them lose everything. Real victory came from refusing to let their choices define my future. I built a peaceful life filled with honest work, caring people, and a purpose that brought hope to others. No one could ever take that away from me. The pain that once controlled my life had become the reason someone else could find a new beginning. If there is one lesson I hope you remember from my story, it is this. Family is not defined only by blood or by the people you are born to. Real family is made of the people who stand beside you when life becomes difficult, who protect you when you are weak, and who believe in you when everyone else walks away. Love, loyalty, and actions will always mean more than shared names. Thank you for listening to my story, and I truly hope it reminds you to value the people who choose to love you every single day.